So, one of the things we're making today is beet risotto. And everybody has these in their house now because of the pandemic. But at MoWino's headquarters, we've been using gloves in the kitchen for years. And one of those major uses comes when you're handling beets. They stain everything. When you're using beets, cooking beets, roasting fresh beets, cutting beets, you want to make sure you don't use a porous surface that's going to absorb the dye. So I never use a cutting board. I use one of those silicone pads. And I don't use a wooden spoon because the spoon absorbs the stain as well. And when I cut them, I use my handy dandy now everyday pandemic use gloves so not to stain my hands. Tip of the day. Cheers. Hi. So we have roasted our beets. We have peeled them. They've let them cool, and then we peeled them. And I now have 2 beets, whole beets, in my food processor. And while I was roasting beets, I also roasted garlic. So I am going to add, and on my garlic, I put sea salt and red pepper flakes and olive oil, and then I roasted the garlic for an hour in the oven with the beets. So I'm just now going to squeeze this lusciously fabulous roasted garlic. If you've never roasted garlic, trust me, you have to. And especially if you're one of those people who say, oh, I hate garlic. It's totally different than raw garlic. It is sweeter, and it has this caramelization smokiness that just adds great flavor enhancements to sauces, to vinaigrettes, and everything like that. So I am going to puree my beets and my garlic, and then I'm going to go to the other side of the kitchen and begin our risotto. Cheers. Look at that deep, beautiful color. So we have 2 tablespoons of my garlic butter melting, and I added probably almost 2, I eyeballed it, but 2 tablespoons of olive oil because I felt it needed it and it should have it. So now that the butter is melted, I am going to add my, not finely chopped, but chopped kind of small, red onion. Now, you could use, traditionally I think people use shallots, and I was going to, truthfully, but you know what? The whole thing's going to be purple and pink, so I figured why not go the whole way. And I'm going to now soft saute my onion until it is tender, and then I will add my rice, and then add my wine, and then all of the layering after that. Stay tuned. So our onions have been sauteing for about 4 minutes, and they're not translucent, but I do think that they're tender enough. So I am now going to add my 1 cup of arborio, otherwise known as risotto rice, and I'm going to toast it in the butter and the onions. Now I should have said beforehand, this is my official risotto pot. It is a flat, wide flat, open fry pan, and it has a deep width, and it is heavy. You need a heavy pan that's going to hold the heat, not a thin pan that just sort of has sporadic heat. When you have one of these pans, and I have to say I got this at one of those discount stores. It doesn't match anything else I own, but it's very important to have the right pan when you make risotto. Okay, so I'm going to let this toast so I get all of the rice. I want to just make sure all of it gets a little bit of surface love before I add our wine. So I'm just patting it down, flattening it. I'm hearing little sizzles, so I just have to make sure that don't let it burn, because that would not be good. Now normally people would put garlic in at this point, but since I have roasted garlic in my beets and I had roasted garlic in my butter, I am not putting extra garlic. Okay. I have a little bit of a toast, but my pan is getting dry, so I am going to go ahead and put in my Malbec Rosé. I first put in a half a cup. I think that is what most people do. So we're just going to let this all simmer. We basically want all of the rice to be moist, not swimming in wine, which I would actually like, but we want it all to absorb the wine. So again, I'm flattening it out just to make sure we equally distribute everything. Then I'm going to let this sort of, I'm going to turn down a little heat. So now I'm just below medium. Before I was a little above medium, but I'm not at low because we want to make sure it stays and keeps cooking. And I hear it's sizzling, burning a little, but I want to use more wine, so I'm just going to put my full cup in and let all of the rice absorb this beautiful Malbec, and then I'll start adding my extra layers of yumminess. Okay, so the wine is finally cooking down and being absorbed by the rice. There's still a small, very minute layer of liquid on the bottom of the pan, but it's close enough that I don't want the rice to burn. So I'm going to start to ladle in my chicken broth. Now you can basically use a vegetable broth, chicken broth. I'm using a low sodium store-bought because I'm out of my own. And I'm adding this broth. Now a traditional ladle is a half a cup, FYI. That's a half a cup every time I'm putting it in. And because this is our first introduction to the chicken broth, I'm going a little heavy because I want it to get in there. So I'm putting in a cup and a half of broth. And I'm just going to move this back over. And the key here is you have to keep your broth hot on the stove and have it going so that you're adding hot broth into the already cooked and cooking arborio rice. So as you can see, the rice is not completely submerged, but it's close to it. And so now I'm just going to let this simmer, let the rice absorb all the chicken broth. One, two. This brings us to 2.5 cups so far. Okay, so we have now put in, I believe, 4 cups of broth. And the interesting thing about here, and I'm not sure if you can see that, but the rice is now beginning to puff up. All of the liquid, the wine, and the broth that we've been adding has been allowing it to puff up. See that? And that's the consistency of what we're looking for. But again, each time I put in broth, I'm patting down my rice because I want much of it to get surface treatment as possible. And you can also see that I'm using a flat based spoon. Stay tuned. Okay, so we have now simmered our rice in a cup of rosé and 5 cups of chicken broth. So I think it's time now to incorporate our roasted beets and roasted garlic puree. And here we go. Very messy stuff. I'll put this in. And I'm breaking my very own rules of never use wooden utensils when you're cooking with beets. But, oh well. So we're just going to incorporate our beautiful, beautiful purple beets. Now, I have been told, I don't believe in seasonal eating, by the way. I don't believe in you only eat certain things at certain times of the year, especially pumpkin. I understand eating freshness, but a lot of people think that this is a Valentine's Day meal. Well, beets work all year round, not just in February. So, anyway, this is beautiful pink, purple fusion. Totally has now transformed the entire dish. I'm going to add a half a cup of our broth and let it continue to simmer away. We're getting to the end of our broth thing part. I just added one whole cut chopped beet just to give some texture, and I'm going to add now half of our Parmesan cheese, or a third of it, just get it into our risotto. I'm going to add another half cup. It's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I'm going to turn down the flame. Okay, we are finally getting to the end of our beautiful, passionate, highly intense cooking of not letting a moment be on its own. So we have our beet risotto with roasted garlic, and I think basically I used almost 6 full cups of chicken broth to saturate the rice after it had already absorbed 1 cup of rosé. And now I'm just going to put the finishing touches on it. I've gone to my garden and I have 1 tablespoon of fresh thyme, and then I have 1 teaspoon of fresh basil, and then just for the heck of it I have some chives that I grabbed while I was out there. So I'm going to turn down my flame, toss in my herbs, and then because beets and goat cheese is such a great combination of flavors, I'm just going to sprinkle some fresh goat cheese that is from a local artisan near my home, so it's really fresh, and that'll just add to a creamier texture when we sit down to eat. Put on the lid, let the goat cheese melt in, and we are ready to eat. Cheers, my friends. Live life, taste life, and make it colorful when you can.